Samaya. So these are 21 essential points, and the first of these is a little nail of recognizing the basis of everything, and this means the kunshi. So I've already spoken about kunshi, meaning tongpanyi, the state of shunyata. This is the source and matrix out of which everything arises. It is the spacious aspect of enlightenment and the nature of mind. As for recognizing the nature of mind as distinct from mind, there are 4 considerations regarding this. The nature of the mind is without thoughts. The nature of mind becomes the basis of everything. The nature of mind is a neutral state, displaying neither virtue nor vice, and with the nature of mind, everything possible originates from us, and this originating is unceasing. This is the manifestation of the nature of mind. And then there are 9 further points that goes into. Well, we have the nature of mind. The nature of the mind is a single source. This is the primordial Buddhahood. There is a single source, but out of the single source, there is a possibility of 2 paths of evolution. And one of them is the path that leads to Nirvana. The other path is that which leads to samsara. The reason there are 2 paths is dependent upon whether you understand and recognize the natural state, or whether you don't understand and don't recognize the natural state. At the very beginning, Kunta Sangpo understood. So Kunta Sangpo never fell into samsara. He never fell into delusion. So he remained from the very beginning in the natural state. Well, on the other hand, we did not. We did not recognize the natural state, and so we fell again into delusion. Now we say the very beginning, but actually samsara has no beginning. Samsara is a wheel. If you take a wheel like this, where is the beginning of the wheel? This is a circle. Where is the beginning of the circle? It just goes round and around. This is samsara. So our lifetimes in samsara have had no absolute beginning. They just go round and around. So we say in absolute terms, samsara has never had a beginning. In the West, some people have a problem with this because Aristotle said you cannot conceive of this. You cannot conceive of an infinite series. You always must have a beginning point. And then from our biblical tradition, it begins the story with creation. Bereshith Elohim, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So in the West, we're used to thinking there must be a beginning point, there must be a creation. But in actual fact, with samsara, there is no absolute beginning. There is no absolute creation out of nothingness. Samsara is the wheel that is always turning. So birth and death. Birth and death for us as individuals, then rebirth. Birth and death for universes as well, and then rebirth for universes as well. If there was a big bang, then there were many big bangs. Universes come and go as individuals come and go. So the story of samsara has no beginning. But then how can we say, how can there be an end to samsara? Well, if you have the wheel, you have the rim of the wheel. Each of our lifetimes in samsara is a point on the wheel, and we keep going around. But if you have a wheel or a circle, you also have the center. This is where our Buddha nature is. This is where the nature of the mind is. The time and history is created by the mind sequencing events, and so then we live on the rim. But the essence here, the nature of the mind, is at the center. And so it is always there, no matter where you think you may be here. So it's all your perspective. As long as you're on the rim, you're undergoing birth and rebirth in samsara. But if you find yourself at the center, you're in Buddha enlightenment, and you're liberated from rebirth in samsara. So this is whether you understand and recognize this or not. If you recognize this, then you remain in the center, like Kuntazangpo did. So he never fell into samsara. When energy arises there, these are the evolution of the visions of nirvana. But if you fall into non-recognition and not understanding, then delusion develops, and you find yourself on the rim of the wheel again. You find yourself in samsara. And then there is the evolution of the visions of samsara. There's another text in this section called, Namkhai Norbu called it the mirror of the luminous mind, where it speaks of these two evolutions, the evolution of the visions of nirvana and the evolution of the visions of samsara. So then it depends which path you take. So you have a single point of origin, which is your primordially enlightened Buddha nature, your nature of mind, but then you have these two paths, these two possibilities. And as a result of that, you have two results. One result, through understanding, you become a Buddha, an enlightened being, and the other pathway, you enter into samsara and you become a deluded, ordinary, sentient being. So the choice is up to you which way you want to go. So you better get your GPS system. Otherwise, you're going to be lost, and you just continue. So this is Dzogchen is all about. You're not constructing something you don't have at present, but because your primordial Buddha nature is already there. It is like a golden image of the Buddha inside the temple. But you don't see it unless you open the doors. So even though your Buddha nature is there, still you must purify all your obscurations in order to make that Buddha nature manifest. So we speak of the Buddha nature of the base, which is present within each one of us. That's the essence, nature, and energy. But then we have the Buddhahood of the path. If we compare our Buddha nature to the sky, say the clear blue sky up there, that's kunchi, the state of shunyata, the spacious aspect of the nature of the mind. And then we have the sun. The sun is like rigpa. And the rays of the sun that illuminate the surface of the earth here, this is like the various yeshes. This represents the energy of Rigpa itself. But normally our sky is filled with clouds. This is thoughts, obscurations, negative emotions, and so on. So only now and then do we get a glimpse of the clear blue sky above the clouds. It's the same way with the practice of the path. Then occasionally we get a glimpse of Rigpa. But most of the time it's covered up by the clouds which fill our head. But there is the possibility of eventually dissolving all these clouds, and so then we can see the face of the sun totally unobscured by clouds, which then illuminates our entire life, and we find ourselves then at the center of things. So Dzogchen is about what is discovering what is already present within us, our primordial enlightenment, but that doesn't mean there's no necessity to practice, because we have these obscurations, and for we don't see the sun of Rigpa. We're living every day in samsara on a cloudy day. So that's why, even though we are potentially enlightened Buddhas, that's our primordial condition, that's potential, it is not manifest or actual at this point, and so there's still the necessity to practice, and that's what Dzogchen's all about. All right? Are we still online?
Actually, it went up.
All right. Now we can ask questions.
Ask questions? Okay, do you want to have a question and answer?
Yes, we can do a few questions. If you have to run off because this was scheduled to end at 4:30, whatever you can, but whatever you want to do.
John, what about the possibility of experiencing sky, clouds are there, but instead of focusing on the clouds, just being attuned to the spaciousness that's holding the clouds?
Yes, but how do you attune?
By detuning to the other.
How do you detune? If your mind is working, you ain't going to do it.
No, it's not mind, it's perception.
Well, as long as you're perceiving, your mind is working.
Is it?
Yeah. Because I explained about dushe, which is perception. This is the mind working, creating objects that have names and concepts. So you're looking clouds. As long as you're recognizing clouds, you're still in mind. You haven't moved beyond. You have to relax that perception.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But actually...
Not so easy. So.
No, but the experience that I'm talking about is actually more of the sensing without attaching any of the ideas.
Yeah, the thing is, you become space. Instead of you're gazing at space, you allow the subject-object differential to dissolve. And so you are the space that you're perceiving. And then you can be the clear blue sky. Yeah.
When you say relax that perception, are you suggesting that you relax your relationship to how you perceive phenomenon, or actually weaken the perception somehow in order to allow the
No, you relax your attachment to the perception. And as I said, the perception, if you analyze it, is a complex structure. And this structure is created in time. So you, in the meditation practice, you slowly come to the point where the mind may still move, things may still arise, but you don't go along with it and allow it to carry you on a trip. Because every thought that arises, including a perception, has a finite quantity of energy. Well, if you don't do anything about that, you allow it to manifest, but you're just there, it manifests, and then you relax in that, and that energy will then dissolve of itself into space. You don't have to do anything about, as long as you're trying to do something about it, you're just feeding it more energy, and then the next thought comes, and it goes on. There's no end to thoughts. So this is the process of self-liberation. Now, in self-liberation, there's three phases. And the first, Chardrol, means liberation but with bare attention. It's like, okay, the clouds come. Well, you're aware of the clouds, even though you're not doing anything about it, but they're there. But then you don't do anything about it, and you allow them to exhaust their energy into space. Well, this is not easy to do. I mean, it sounds very simple, but it's not easy to do because lifetime after lifetime, it's been our habit to do the opposite. We're always trying to do something and feel we have to do something. Well, the next stage is called Shardrol. This means liberation as soon as it arises. The cloud appears, you don't do anything, but then the cloud just liberates of itself. But still there's a difference between the arising and its passing away again. At the third phase, it's Rangdol. As it arises, it liberates of itself. And this creative inactivity, Tao, you don't have to do anything. But it's very difficult to get into that space. Because I say, we've trained our minds since birth to do the exact opposite. So it takes a little practice.
Also pointed out is that if you focus on something long enough, there's what he describes it as habituation, that the mind disconnects and stops seeing it, which is another step.
What happens to a persistent thought that keeps on coming no matter how much you try to ignore it and let it fall?
Oh, you don't have to ignore it. You just don't do anything about it. It'll come again and again, but eventually it will exhaust its energy and stop coming. It's doing something about the thought, attaching to it, following after it, then you keep feeding energy into it, and it will come again and again. But even a persistent thought and obsession like, I'm hungry, I have to eat, Well, all right, that's a sensation, and then we get attached to it, we keep thinking about it, and so on. But if you just allow it to manifest, and then it will dissolve of itself.
Could we utilize in the practice Einstein's had come up with the thought of in his that time doesn't really exist. I mean, I remember that he did say that time didn't really exist, and if time doesn't really exist, then my conclusion is that if Einstein said time doesn't really exist, where does all these couples come from?
Oh, he said time is relative. It's the same as there's a space-time continuum. He's talking about making measurements and how you can locate things in time, whether you can measure speed, velocity, things like this, the mathematics of this. But here, time and space become united like it does in Dzogchen. So if you enter into self-liberation, then you suspend time. Because time is created by us sequencing our thoughts one after another. So the more thoughts you have, the more time you have.
So are you saying that these couples are all just mentally created?
The whole universe is mentally created. We're all here creating the universe. It's our collective collaboration to create this universe. Not just God doing it. We're all doing it along with Him. Yeah.
I can make the question more specific, but it might be more interesting to make it general, which is, I don't know hardly a Westerner who's had more one-on-one time with Lopin than you have. And I'm just wondered if you talk a little bit about his direct style of teaching to you and his approach to conveying sort.
Well, his approach is very direct, but generally he will have the text there, but the text is like key points, and then he can elaborate on that, but it keeps the general structure of the text. This is the formal teaching. Sometimes he will teach a little bit informally too, but generally public teaching, he will take a specific text and teach from that.
Yeah, I think public teaching has lots of tapes and transcripts and so forth. I was just wondering if there were particular moments with him that you found especially powerful that you might share.
Well, I put a lot of it in various books. Reference, I can read about it there. It's hard to think of a specific incident just like that. Oh, one thing, like he in Paris, they hit him with Neo-Vedanta, you know, saying, "Oh, Rinpoche, this is Dzogchen. Isn't this just the same as Vedanta? It's all one mind." So then he said, "Oh, all one mind. Mm-hmm. Well, then the Buddha became enlightened, but it's all one mind. How come we aren't enlightened?" So things like that come up. You know,
That's a good question, though. Did he answer half of Vedanta and Dzogchen and what the similarities are?
well, of course, it's an interesting topic because, I mean, this comes out of Indian civilization, and as I said before, in the old days, North Indian civilization also extended up into Central Asia too. It was all one cultural region. And so the Buddha Shakyamuni, he grew up in this context. Now, there's different aspects to Vedanta and different ways of explaining. If you go to the Upanishads, there's the Karma Kanda and the Jnana Kanda. Karma Kanda is, karma here means ritual activity. And this is all the ritual stuff you have in the Vedas and the Brahmanas and so on. Jnana-kanda means the wisdom section, and this is the interpretations that you get in the Upanishads. But actually in the Upanishads there's various different interpretations, not all the same, even though Shankara tried to make it that way. And most of the Upanishads are post-Buddhist. The Chandogya and Briharanyaka, they appear to be earlier than the Buddha, but not much earlier. But most of the rest of them, you can even find sometimes references in them to Buddhist teachings, and so as you do also in the Bhagavad Gita, which was probably written a couple hundred years before Christ. And because there's all this bubbling and happening, there are ideas being exchanged and so on. The Buddha was in contact with the Jatala Brahmins and this, and praised their understanding and this. And the whole thrust then of Vedanta growing out of the Upanishads is to get at the ultimate reality. And for that, they took the name Brahman. Now, originally, Brahman, which comes from a root meaning purity, meant the magical power that's generated by doing rituals, including the yajna, the sacrifice ritual. And gradually that became more and more emphasized, so that even the gods came under its rule. By performing certain rituals, you coerce the devas to do what they should be doing, and so on. But then speculations continued, and taking this word Brahman, it came to mean an ultimate reality, and the Upanishads are very much about this. And so then they make a distinction between Nirbija Brahman and Sub-bija Brahman, whether it can have a form you can talk about, or it's beyond form, and so on. Well, then the interesting discussion is between the Buddhist understanding of shunyata and what the Upanishads and the Vedanta's writers mean about Brahman. Well, when you get to Shankara, 8th century, because when people say Vedanta, they generally mean Shankara, his writing. Well, he was 8th century, so long after the time of the Buddha. Well, if you look at it, his approach is very similar, actually. A good reason for that, because he drew on Gaudapada. Now, his teacher was Govinda. Govinda was a disciple of Gaudapada, who was apparently a Bengali. And he wrote a commentary on the Mandukya Upanishads. And he more or less explains this Upanishad in terms of Madhyamaka, because you find him using there the arguments we find in Madhyamaka, even the terminology about non-production and so on. And then Shankara adopts all of that. Now it's interesting, in that Mandukya Upanishad, there's even an invocation that invokes the Buddha. So one wonders, well, who was this Gaudapada? He sounds like a Buddhist, but he's writing about an Upanishad. Well, maybe he was both, Well, that's not a problem for me, but for many sectarian people it becomes a problem, Has to be Vedanta, or it has to be Buddha. But he wasn't saying there was one mind. This is a more theosophical interpretation, which was later and so on. But Shankara's understanding was quite sophisticated, but also rather non-theistic, so that his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita is not so good, because he really has to twist some meanings there. That's why Ramajana's commentary is 12th century on the Bhagavad Gita is much better, because it is a theistic text. It's got God there. But in Buddhism, it's non-theistic. We don't have the God language. But with the Upanishads, they can lean both ways. Some of them can get a bit theistic, others not at all. And then later interpretations, Vedanta and later commentaries, can go this way or that way. But Ramajana, he was a follower of Vaishnava, so of course he wants to exalt Vishnu as the ultimate reality, but Vishnu is a personality, so how do you square personality with Brahman? The same problem also appears actually in Christianity. If you get into the Greek theology, the Orthodox Church, not the Latin theology, because the Roman theologians, they were all a bunch of lawyers, like Augustine and Tertullian and that. Lawyers. But the Greeks were mystics. So you read the Cappadocians and so on dealing with this problem. And in the Greek church, they make a distinction between ousia theou and theos. Theos is God. But ousia theou is the essence of God, like we were saying before, mind and the nature of mind. Okay, theos, he's the grandfather figure sitting on the sky in his throne like he is in the Bible, the creator, in charge of providence, and all the rest that God is supposed to do. But he's not the ultimate reality, which is beyond conception. That's the essence of God. It's beyond the person. Now, that is not allowed in the Roman Church, because when Meister Eckhart came out with that, he was denounced for heresy, because he talked about God, but also the Godheit, godness, or the essence of God, which is beyond human understanding. That's not allowed. Because I say, these are lawyers that control our Catholicism and Protestantism. John Calvin was a lawyer also. And so they put theology in legalistic terms. And therefore, inherently they're opposed to mysticism. You know? But it's allowed in the Greek church. It doesn't mean the individual or Orthodox priest understands this at all. But we have this problem in Christianity also. Yeah.
I wanted to hear a little bit about those wild bikinis in the Amdo. I know it's off that subject.
The wild bikinis where?
Amdo.
Amdo? Well, that's a province in Tibet.
I know.
Yeah, well, there are many dakinis there. I mean, you can ask some of these people from Amdo, they can tell you about them. In Amdo, also they have women lamas, they're all called Khandro. And so, for example, you have Khandro Rinpoche, who visits the U.S. now. She's the daughter of Minling Tritchen, who's passed away, but when alive he was the head of the Mindeling lineage, and this was his daughter. He educated her as a lama. So, in East Tibet, and sometimes Central Tibet, they'll call a woman Lama Khandro. And my own connection was with Sarah Khandro, who's one of the teachers of Dujam Rinpoche, and also the principal master of Chato Rinpoche, and so on. And now Sarah Harding is in the process of publishing her biography, and she was a very important teacher in recent times in Kham. You know, Kham and Amdo, that's eastern Tibet, so they're right next to each other.
Sarah Jacobi?
Sarah Harding.
Sarah Jacobi did her dissertation on Sarah Khandro and wrote her. And
But
translated her
it's the
back.
same woman,
Actually not.
I think.
No.
No?
Sarah Jacobi just finished her dissertation in Virginia about 6 years ago.
Oh, well, anyway, I met Sarah Harding last year in Berlin, and she had this biography she was going to publish. So maybe more than one.
More than one Sarah.
Yeah. So many Sarahs, I get them mixed up. Well, almost 5 o'clock, so... Yes?
Back to this concept of time, would you say that Vedic astrology, especially because it's so involved with all these couples, would you say that it's immersed in time, the Vedic astrology?
Astrology deals with cycles of time. Doesn't matter Vedic, non-Vedic, Western, Eastern. They're cycles of time.
But it's not, it's really a relevancy of in using it.
Of course. When your bill comes due, you have to pay it. So in practical terms, you have to deal with time. Doesn't mean it's ultimately real. The distinction between practical things and relative reality, which we're all existing in, I mean, the policeman is in charge of our relative reality. I mean, yes, we're enlightened beings, we're intrinsically free, and so on, except the policeman is there.
It's an interpretation between the Western and
No. You find very similar interpretations. This is, there's no absolute line, Western, Eastern.
Can I try to say that an analogy with a circle and the center of the circle is very striking. And I think this question about time really goes back into that analogy, because if you read at the center of this wheel turns, so whatever you actually see on the wheel itself is really manifestation of that samsaric. So time is a manifestation of samsaric mind that actually went into that route. And everything that pertains to time is valid to samsara, but it's not ultimately valid in the center.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So it has its relative reality and its practical reality. You have to deal with the passing hours, but it doesn't mean it's ultimately real. All right, so I think we will conclude.
Thank you.